Hello and welcome back to Are You Experienced? I'm Joe Timson, and this week I'm joined by Mel McGowan, founder and chief creative officer at Storyland Studios. Now, earlier in the series we had Matt Ferguson from Storyland on the show, and he suggested I speak to Mel for a completely different perspective on creativity, on craft, and how you bring stories and IP to life in physical spaces. The conversation absolutely delivered. Mel is a true visionary, not to mention a bona fide historian when it comes to the themed entertainment world. So I learned a huge amount from this one, and I think you will too. So without further ado, on with the show. Mel, hello. Welcome to Are You Experienced?
Hey, good to be with you, Joe.
Thanks so much for taking the time. And yeah, really, really excited to dive in and get your perspective. Although we've spoken to Matt from Storyland already, I think you bring a really interesting background, and your journey with Storyland I'm really excited to unpack. So yeah, thanks for doing it.
Yeah, great to be with you, and look forward to sharing whatever brain damage I've incurred, and hope it could be helpful.
Nice, awesome. So like a lot of others that I've come across in this space, you're a Disney alum. We'll kind of go into that experience in a minute, but just like how important is Walt Disney's legacy to this industry? It seems from what I've seen so far on my travels that it's hard to overstate that sort of influence, but what's your take on that?
Well, I think he's definitely one of my heroes. Certainly, I'm a big fan of storytellers, from Jesus to Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Walt Disney. But certainly, I would certainly put Walt up there with one of the greatest of 20th century storytellers. And one of the reasons I resonate with him is I'm not a particularly verbal, oral, dynamic, cult of personality type speaker. And so there's those that are gifted with that ability to kind of hold a room in their hand, but or with their voice. But I really appreciate the fact that Walt, had that vision, wisdom, humility, whatever you want to call it, to actually collect men and women around them that could help them get stories out to broader audiences, and then to allow those audiences to step deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole of those stories. So that's certainly something that I think. But I'm also a bit of a historian, particularly of kind of experience and placemaking, and from the cathedral builders to Fred and Thompson, the guys that built Luna Park, Coney Island, some of the people that built the place that inspired Walt Disney, from Tivoli Gardens to Walter Knott at his dusty old ghost town. So there was Walt was also a great synthesizer of being curious, seeing the world, picking out little pieces where we could, but then bringing it all together and having 1 + 1 = 3. So there's definitely a lot of fandom around our studio for Walt Disney, but also in recognition that he was building on the hard work of dirt farmers and a lot of other kings and a lot of other amazing people throughout history.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. A real scholar of the industry by the sounds of it. One day we'll go deep on all that stuff. Hopefully,
that's a deep rabbit hole for sure. But I am pleased as punch that Leslie Iwerks has put out that Disneyland handcrafted documentary. I don't know if you've seen that, but that really highlights the hands that built Disneyland, and from the guy dodging the forklift getting ready to roll over on him to the people turning the trees upside down. It really just shows what a beautiful collective art form our particular weird industry is. So really appreciate that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, the whole premise of this show is me kind of finding my feet really in this industry, even as a consumer, I should say. Theme parks, coming from the middle of the UK, weren't a huge part of my childhood. Like they tend to be in the US. That's changing. There's more and more. Obviously, the Universal just started out. It's a big park in the UK, but and a lot of people used to make pilgrimages to Florida in the summer to go to the big parks there. But yeah, it's fascinating to be kind of immersed in this industry for the first time. So that time at Disney, what are the experiences and lessons from that early part of your career that you've touched on a few there, but what are the kind of the key things that you took from that experience at Disney that has kind of guided you?
Well, during the 10 years I was there, I was also working on my graduate degree in master planning design at Cal Poly. And even though I'd come in with a film background, I spent quite a bit of time in operations because I really started when I was really still just about finished with film school. And
Mm.
I think that you'll hear from certainly any Imagineer, anyone that's involved with designing these experiences, they richly cherish and they're very proud of their role as as a cast member. Just
Mm.
being that much closer. Most of us have walked in the moccasins of our guests. At some point we were guests and children experiencing that wonderment ourselves, but it's a different thing to sit on this other side of the table of the cast member that's frankly, underpaid, doing the heavy lifting of really creating the magic, delivering that pixie dust, making those memories, quite
Mm.
often with repetitive work, repetitive questions. Where's the bathroom? In my training, I had the unique experience of having a little bit of an operational overview of many different divisions and departments, from working graveyard shifts to cleaning toilets and working with
Wow.
custodial. I mean, it was really just eye opening, and I find that today, even as we're designing new theme parks from the ground up or new
Mm.
environments, urban environments, just that, it's one thing to draw something beautiful, to build something beautiful. It's something completely different to make sure that it's able to be maintained and operated,
Yeah.
and kind of have guests be able to intuitively find their way around. And um, anyways, it really is just a different perspective that is
Yeah.
very much as valuable as going to grad school for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. That's been a common theme, I think, across these conversations so far is um, people talking about making sure that, the advice to young people and things like that really is making sure you kind of get your hands dirty and get experience in every aspect of the business that you can, because it just, like you say, whether you're kind of producing a show or operating a experience or a theme park or whatever, there's so many little kind of traps that you can fall into if you don't have that, lived experience of, okay, well, this isn't going to work because X, Y, Z. You don't really get that
Exactly.
unless you've kind of been amongst it. So yeah, it's
And I think
definitely
it just fostering that empathy, really, because
yeah,
quite often in corporate situations, there's always inevitably the likelihood of some type of Berlin Wall or siloing, between,
yeah,
for example, the design versus the operation,
mm,
versus the financial executive suits, and so it's just, if you haven't really sat in the shoes of that other person or their perspective, it's really easy to think that it's kind of us against them, when really at the end of the
yeah,
day that's just foolishness.
yeah, for sure. So Disney, like you say, 10 years there, and while you were getting your graduate degree, and then you went straight from that to founding Storyland, which you've been doing for the last 25 years, right? So
Well, almost actually. I thought
okay,
I'd retire at Disney. My dad had worked at Disney. And I felt like I won the lottery. With the opportunities they'd given me, including paid for that grad degree. But one of my college professors, an adjunct professor, reached out to me, asked for kind of a tour of some of the work that we were doing in the renewal of the Disney resort here in California, and
mm,
actually had a bunch of Chinese developers that he wanted to show around
mm,
because they were potential clients of his. But there in the parking lot, he made me that offer I couldn't refuse, and offered to double my salary, and handed me
right.
two projects that were both larger in scale than the 460 acres at the time we were working on in Anaheim.
Oh wow,
And it was kind of one of those offers you couldn't refuse. And that,
yeah,
did that for about a year and a half. And that really was unique, designing, master planning, and titling one of the largest new towns on a former cattle ranch, kind of for
wow,
the Duttons. If there's any Yellowstone fans out there, the
yeah,
Duttons of
yeah,
Riverside County, the Dominigoni family, and then working with some of the local native tribes here in Southern California in the Coachella Valley, looking at destination resorts for Morongo Resort and so on. So just that opportunity to step outside of the berm, the safe, kind
Yeah.
of embryo of the
Yeah.
Disney sphere, to kind of look at applying some of those lessons learned. I say from the Magic Kingdom into the real world, beyond the berm, and that's actually what
Yeah.
my graduate thesis was on, was kind of taking some of those imagineering principles and wondering if there was relevance to kind of making the world that we all live in, that we work, that we play in, a little closer, not necessarily closer to Disneyland, but really at least closer to a world that could and should be. And so
Yeah.
that's really kind of been the thrust, and certainly the reason for our founding after 9/11 around 2001, just about a quarter century ago.
Yeah.
Starting Storyland Studios. So it's been a
Wow.
amazing ride.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Well, it's not really serendipity because obviously you worked hard to put yourself in that position, but to have an offer you can't refuse like that, obviously, is sometimes a good lever or catalyst to sort of taking the plunge into doing something that's gonna be your life's work, let's say. So tell us about Storyland then. So obviously we had Matt on the show in an earlier episode, but for those who don't know Storyland, what's the founder's perspective on? You've kind of touched on it there, to be fair, but why you decided to create that business and that sort of journey to where we are today over the last 25 years?
Sure. Yeah, well, I think having spent the time and understanding how Disney Imagineering was structured, I love that it was this Renaissance organization that had 140 different disciplines, from architects to artists to poets to engineers and project managers, and that there was a different way of looking at the world, right? And my graduate thesis was the idea of pushing against the way that architectural and real estate development was kind of thought of and conceived in this form follows function model,
Mm,
and really just applying some of the lessons of the power of story to kind of create transformation, to bring people together, and really the idea that what would it look like if form followed fiction. And it wasn't
mm,
that radical of an idea, because the reality is, throughout history, certainly in sacred space design and civic design, from Rome to classical
mm,
architecture, everything meant everything, every detail,
yeah.
ornamentation, the structural elements. It wasn't just what's good, fast, and cheap, right? And so rediscovering some of those roots of storytelling in space, and really thinking, man, is there a benefit to the real world? It's
Mm,
one thing to be able to spend a career designing these environments that people gladly spend $100 to step foot into these immersive crafted bubbles, but is there application beyond, again, the berm? And had that conversation with a couple of partners. I was coming at it from what I now call spatial storytelling,
mm,
the idea of creating worlds and stories that you can step into and be immersed in, with all the disciplines that it takes to pull that off: architecture,
mm.
interior design, master planning, graphic, show set, attraction design. My brother had come from a tech background. He was actually ready to retire at 30,
All
and
right.
really understood the power of where technology was going to really augment our physical reality, and to provide different levels of connection through that power of technology. We call that interactive storytelling, and quite
Right.
often that's stories that you can kind of interact with, whether it's in
Mm,
real life, digitally, virtually, whatever. And then Matt's part of our team of strategic storytellers, that really understands that you got to, before you're broadcasting a story, you need to figure out what that story is, right? You got to,
mm,
whether it's a brand, an original IP, whether it's creating a soil specific story and helping facilitate and articulate that, quite often with competing voices, right? Could you imagine if
mm.
someone was trying to simplify the story of America in today's day and age, how controversial and
Yes.
and
Yeah.
complicated that might be. But there's a specific process we go through to define that consensus, that kind of promised land of an
Yeah.
agreed upon story. And so we actually launched with this crazy idea of being the world's first three-dimensional storytelling practice, to do what Disney does for themselves, but to basically do that for the rest of the world. And again, it has been one heck of a crazy ride over
Yeah.
these 2.5 decades, from
Yeah.
clients around the world, from the sands of Saudi Arabia to LAX, the world's most hated international airport hub, to villages for survivors of child sex trafficking in Southeast Asia to, I mean, you name it, working with companies, causes, large and small, and of course being able to maintain our relationships and client base with the Disneys and the Universals,
Yeah.
in the themed entertainment space. But it's been just amazing to kind of get what we're passionate about and find out that there's actually a need in the world to apply some of this thinking.
There's a couple of things that really jumped out to me there. So you mentioned about spatial storytelling, interactive storytelling, and strategic storytelling. Those kind of three pillars, if you like, do they always show up in every project that you do, or do you kind of, is it like a weighted mix depending on what the project is, or are they all clear and present in everything that you do?
I think where they don't necessarily show up in every project. They quite often show up in our journey with a client, because we
Right.
don't really think of these typically as separate projects, like one and done. We
Yeah.
tend to see ourselves, and clients tend to view us as more Sherpas for this ongoing journey.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
great clients really almost you can't quite shake them, because there's always something going on.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah. Yeah.
here we are celebrating Disneyland's 70th birthday, and I can't tell you how busy we are, taking as much as we can to help steward that international cultural historical asset.
Yeah.
And certainly looking forward, the amount of, I just saw new construction fences going up yesterday for the new Coco attraction that's visible from the public right away, redeveloping former parking lots and backstage areas. So many of our quote projects really are a phase of again, a step in a journey, and along that
Yeah.
journey, there is quite often a need, even if it starts off with a need for, hey, I just need a brand or a logo. Ultimately that turns into, hey, this thing's really taken off now, we really want to help get that story out, across
Yeah.
digital platforms and physical experiences. And so, yeah, it's been fun, especially some of the clients that we've been able to work with through that entire journey of kind of
Mm.
ideating, in some cases, an original IP, an
Mm.
original hospitality concept, and then introducing them to the worlds of kind of experience design and physical development. So,
Yeah.
for example, like brands like Hard Rock, they've been around, but we help them look at stepping into the residential space, and what does
Mm.
that look like for people that want to live like rock stars, right? And what
Yeah.
does that
Yeah. Yeah.
actually mean? Because
Yeah.
throughout different stages of life, by the way. So,
Yeah.
anyways, it's been a fun
That's
journey
really
working with
interesting.
some of the brands that we love.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Hard Rock hotels are fantastic. That's an obvious move. So yeah, I guess why not? Why not go into the residential
Well,
side?
sometimes it seems easy, right? Because it's like, I love Vegas for a
Yeah.
couple of nights. I don't know if I want to live there or retire there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's that idea of like, hey, there's this ethos, but then like, how do you create the different, from cocooning to connecting, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
anyway. So it was
That's
really
interesting.
creative challenges. Yeah.
Yeah. And on the other thing that jumped out on the IP side, because it's something I've been sort of thinking about a lot. We're going to talk more about IP in a minute, and the sort of changing trends there. But you touched on when it came to strategic storytelling, it's about achieving consensus and really kind of almost, I'm sort of paraphrasing here, so tell me if I'm wrong, but it's about kind of almost distilling something down to the single clear story or thread that goes through it, right? But one thing that is interesting to me, we're doing a lot of work in immersive entertainment at the moment, and there's some kind of like constraints and sort of realities that you have to face in certain with certain IPs, where you might have this vast world, or like take something like Lord of the Rings, or some crazy huge thing like that, and then you have to you can't try and recreate that in an immersive show, for example, because you'd end up not doing it justice and turning people off or whatever. But so that idea of distilling down or finding kind of a particular storyline or micro narrative within that whole world, and then expressing that in a physical space is, I find really really interesting. So I think sometimes people get that wrong. They say, "Oh, we've got this IP. Let's try and create the the caves of fires of Mordor or whatever," and it's like, well, that's not going to work. You're not going to render that in a kind of authentic way. So there's not really a question here, but it's just kind of picking up on what you said, and whether that's some of the work that you do in that kind of spatial storytelling space that is then kind of drawn from the strategic storytelling, which is like, okay, well, what is the story? What's a story here that we can realistically express in a physical space? Is that
Absolutely.
something
Yeah.
that?
I mean, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, we've worked with all of my favorite IPs, certainly.
Yeah,
And you're right. There is a strategic storytelling foundation that starts with some feasibility work. Walking
yeah,
in before we even start Blue Sky, we kind of have an understanding of what the capital expenditure,
mm,
CapEx requirement is, some of the throughput requirements. We understand the difference between a touring exhibit versus a
mm,
theme park that's built to last, or a themed land. And there's different parameters. I just had lunch with one of our creative directors yesterday, who worked on the Harry Potter Visions of Magic, which
mm,
is, I had just had a chance to experience in Singapore. It sits just outside the gates of the Universal Studios Park in
right,
Singapore. And I would say it's actually better than any of the experiences inside the paywall of the theme park. And
yeah,
certainly as enjoyable as kind of certainly I've been to the Wizarding World a few times, and so
mm,
as exciting and as wonderful as sitting in Hogsmeade enjoying my warm butterbeer, which is always the best butterbeer.
mm,
It's just it was just really wonderful because it was so poetic,
mm,
interpretive, creative. You just didn't know what was around the next corner. And again, that's a different type of parameter. It may not be as repeatable, for example, but
yeah,
in terms of a one and done and a touring exhibit that, if you're in a city or you're traveling through, you have to do it, you have to see it. So there are different parameters, right? I mean, there's certain experiences that are just once in a lifetime, you have to do them. And there's certain things that, hey, this could be your new third place, and you would fully enjoy. There was a group of school kids here in LA that would put the
mm,
robes on and pretend they were, Hogwarts attendees, and just have their annual passes, walk into,
yeah,
the Hog's Head, and just sit down and do homework every day. They were
yeah,
cosplaying basically, and for them,
yeah,
that was like a wonderful immersive, you know, part of their adolescence was,
yeah, yeah,
cosplaying, Harry and Hermione and and the gang.
yeah,
So.
yeah. Why not? Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Um, Yeah, so I mean, staying with IP then. So you, at the back end of last year, you announced this new partnership with, I'm going to butcher the surname here, but it's Nate Bargatze. Is that how you pronounce the surname?
Nate Bargatze, yeah.
Bargatze, yeah. To launch Nate Land, which is a new theme park in Nashville, where Nate's from. Talk to us about that project, how that came to be, because for my money, that has to be the first stand-up comedy originating theme park in terms of where the IP originated, right?
Yeah. Well, I think for us, again, like a lot of our work, a lot of our projects, it's based on friendship, relationship. Nate
Mm,
happened to be filming his first feature film at a studio complex called Thrillith Studios, which is
mm,
originated as Pinewood Studios, U.S. Here in the U.S. outside of Atlanta, and the owner of that studio, and actually of the entire town that it sits, is a gentleman named Dan Cathy, who is one of the owners of Chick-fil-A, which
oh,
is a
okay.
large, fast food empire,
Mm,
basically family-run empire. But again, he's a kind of a bit of an artist himself, and he had this vision to effectively create not just one of the largest production facilities in America, but actually this entire cultural creative ecosystem. And so we've been part of that journey for at least the last five actually over 5 years, 7 years, I think,
mm, mm,
creating this entire town, this wonderful studio. We just opened a $300 million complex called Trilith Live, with an entertainment component, and,
mm,
performing arts center and theaters. Anyways, just to say that Nate has been. outspoken about basically filling this hole, this
Mm.
childhood gap that is not only in his heart, but millions of Nashvillians that had one of the most wonderful regional theme parks in America. In the '70s, a park named Opryland, USA,
Right.
I can only imagine what it would be like if some of my childhood parks, Europa Park in
Mm.
Germany, or Disneyland, if I have these amazing memories and I want to pass them on to my kids, and some boneheaded executive thought it was a better idea to scrape that and put up an outlet mall, and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
basically what happened. So I think Nate's been talking about this for years, and part of it isn't necessarily just hey, everywhere you go, you're gonna see a picture of Nate, and he's gonna break out a new job. It's not so much at the same type of IP
I
centric
see.
thing. It's really about kind of what Dollywood's intention, or Dolly
Yeah.
Parton's intention in terms of doing Dollywood. It was really about blessing her community, her family, creating a jobs base. I mean, she's been pretty
Mm.
direct about it. This was about providing jobs for an
Yeah.
economically depressed area in the Smoky Mountains. And with Nate, I think it really does stem from that altruistic vision. That one of the things I was attracted to it. It felt a lot like Walt Disney trying
Yeah.
to create a place that he could make some memories with his daughters, and just wondering that
Mm.
why isn't there a place that, as a dad with some daughters, I can't go and make some memories. And that's basically Nate's perspective on Nashville. It's like, this is a proven market. When the
Mm.
market was, a third the size that it is now, they have this hugely successful park.
Mm.
Why isn't there something that families can do together? And again, it's just one facet of a multi transmedia really company called Nateland Entertainment
Right.
that is rolling out from, and they're looking at everything from cruises to location based attractions, and you name it. But I think one of the things, again, if you're not as familiar with Nate or his brand, it's really about this safe family space where it's
Mm.
okay to actually make some memories, have some laughs with your
Mm.
kids, right? In the same
Mm.
room. You can look at, it's not like you're watching what used to be a PG movie in the '80s, which always still, like, just to get that PG rating, it's like they had to have some cuss words, or, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
like
yeah.
you're looking awkwardly that, whatever,
Yeah.
some scene that comes up. It's like, it's a safe place to be able to, again, just laugh with your family. And
Yeah.
he just encounters so many obstacles in his journey towards being the highest grossing comedian in the US, that he's just like, why does it have to be so hard to just make some memories with my kid, in a family
Yeah.
friendly, safe space together. And so, anyways, there's a lot of complexity to that. I will say that it's one of the biggest creative challenges of our
Okay.
career. But just flew out of Nashville. I think we landed the plane on a concept. We're looking, for different sites, but it's been a joy to kind of get inside of his brain. He has a
Mm.
book out called Big Dumb Eyes, to see behind the veil of those big dumb
Yeah.
eyes, to explore that big beautiful brain. And he's got some strategery going on behind those eyes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it really is just a blast playing in that sandbox, for sure.
Nice. And talk us through why that's been such a creative challenge then. What's the sort of
Well, I
pressures?
think it's kind of one of those things that's in today's day and age, the way the current industry is, it's almost like a slam dunk. Hey, what are the highest grossing IPs, or filmic
Mm.
televisual properties, and let's translate that into real life in whatever parameters we have. Again, whether it's a traveling exhibit, whether it's a dedicated theme park or resort. But again, it really is a bigger challenge, and I think a lot more fun, to create what we call soil specific
Mm.
stories and soil
Oh, okay.
specific IPs that really do resonate with the unique DNA personality of, whether it's an individual, whether it's a
Yeah.
brand, whether it's a city, a
Mm.
region. And so all those things are coming into play as we're kind of crafting this unique park that's certainly not the standard playbook in today's day and age of, hey, which
No.
IP can I license, and let's cobble, something together that, I mean,
Yeah.
as much as I love an Islands of Adventure, I'm not sure what Betty Boop and, some of the Toon Lagoon IPs have to do with,
Yeah.
Jurassic Park, or,
Yeah.
whatever. So.
No, yeah, 100%. I think too often you see IP as the strategy rather than people being strategic with IP. So, it's kind of like, okay, well, we've got this IP, we'll just do whatever, and it's going to sell tickets based on the fandom. But rather than thinking, okay, here's a kind of a format or an idea that we think people will love. Do we need an IP for it? And if so, what's the right IP to bring to this kind of to this idea? But then you're kind of taking that a step further, and soil specific, like you say, could be. I love that phrase, by the way. But you could be a brand, could be a person. But obviously, it sounds like it started with you thinking about, okay, a place, right, and what should the experience that we build here be, based on the kind of the DNA of that location? Is that how that sort of originated, source specific?
That's one of them. I mean, we start with the same holy trinity that every good story starts with, character, setting, and plot. And so
Yeah.
certainly that setting, that place is part of that. It's foundational. But we also want to think about that collective personality, that character, both of our client, our audience, our guests, and then we get into the plot. What is the big idea? What is it that really kind of triggers that decision to check something out? And in this case, we're actually looking globally of what is it that would put this on the mental mind map of a potential family in UK that's been there, done that, been to Orlando, been to LA, but hey, is there anything else to this kind of heartland American story? And what is it that would allow me to immerse myself into something that is intriguing and adventurous and exciting, beyond, especially again, if some of those same international known IPs and brands, if they're already existing outside your doors and in a Universal UK park or Disneyland Paris, what's a story that really can only be experienced in that context of kind of of a place like Nashville,
Yeah.
which is compelling in and of itself, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Nashville's
yeah,
like
it's
this
Nashville's
dynamic world
definitely.
city. Yeah, next gen creative. It's not just country western artists. I mean, it
No.
really is. There's a lot going on. It's a pretty amazing creative place.
Yeah, we think about IP and audience, and again, more in the immersive space at the moment, but thinking about this idea of IP, format, and location, and how they all fit together to create a concept that's gonna work. So I love that phrase, soil specific storytelling. I think that's really interesting. We have had theme park rides and attractions and whatever, drawing from, as we've just spoken about, big movies, books, TV shows, comic books, increasingly almost to the point of frustration potentially, music with Dollywood, and even people like Mr. Beast and from the kind of creator economy launching LBE attractions in I think it's in Saudi, his Beast Land or whatever it's called. Are there any other places where you think IP could originate from that would lend itself naturally to LBE? But also the kind of challenge, I suppose, to you as a historian of all of this stuff is, do you think it's possible for IP to originate in LBE and then develop and kind of grow into these other mediums and to create that sort of transmedia thing? The only one I could think of, which is a bit of a cheat, is Pirates of the Caribbean, right? So that obviously started out as a Disney ride, but it's really drawing on all of the characters from that period of history, right? Rather than necessarily the attraction itself. So that's the only thing I could come up with, but curious to hear if there's anything that you can think of.
Well, certainly just one example. I mean, we've spent a good part of the last 5 years in the awareness recognition that gaming is combined global revenues is bigger than film and music combined, right? And so certainly that's a huge area that is currently being mined, particularly in the KSA, Saudi Arabia, new developments. And we've had a hand in a number of those and had, the joy of getting to know and work with some of, my heroes in video game design. And so can't wait to, roll some of that stuff out. A lot of our team worked on the Nintendo, Super Nintendo World rollout, letting people step into these digital environments that they, into physical versions of these previously only experienced in digital environments. But yeah, I think, the idea of an original IP, starting off in a park and then turning into kind of media. It's an uphill battle. It's not the
Mm,
normal flow of the gravitational forces, but certainly I think when you have places that are as resonant and known as a Disney park, for example, or even some of the so different. We work with the Mac family, for example, in Europa Park, and in terms of trying to start talking about, hey, what are some characters that really could have some legs outside the park and that kids could interact with. I mean, it's to some level, it's a numbers game, it's an original IP, but when you're talking about creating a new character series, it's got to be good, and
mm,
at least starting in with some name recognition is better than starting in from ground up. But
mm,
it's something that is, I think, worth exploring, and it
mm,
really does boil down to partnerships on that. And that's the reason that right now you have these marriages between the technology companies, the content companies,
mm,
and then increasingly they do want a physical presence in the parks. And so that marriage, if you will,
mm.
is real, and there's synergies there. And so it's a lot tougher if you're only one of the three legs of that
Yeah,
equation. But if
yeah,
you have all three, it definitely is making sense for them to kind of have that kind of synergy.
yeah, yeah. And I suppose, yeah, you'd have to, that platform of being either in a major park, it would likely be something originating from within a major park that people are already attending, right? So it's going to be a really hard sell to get people
Yeah, I
to,
mean, like John Favreau was talking about a Magic Kingdom movie.
right.
My son grew up reading the Kingdom Keepers books. I mean, I'd love to see that come to life. But again,
Yeah,
I'd only want it to happen if it had the right director, the right budget,
yeah,
the
yeah,
the right distribution. But it'd be great if someone would do it, because you got to think about the Disney castle parks. They're pretty much around the world now.
yeah,
Soon to come to Abu Dhabi. So the idea of that paradigm is something that a lot of people, the global audience, is going to be able to understand the conceit of step. What if that world became real? Kind of like a night at the museum. People have been to a
yeah,
museum, right? They get the
yeah,
concept. And what happens when you talk about this supernatural layer, the shenanigans going on when
yeah,
the sun goes
yeah.
down or when the park's closed.
Speaking of global audience, so your Storyland, I should say, are the presenting partner of the Global Experience Index alongside the Themed Entertainment Association, or T, as it reads to an English person. Um, uh, what struck me when reading that was that, first of all, how big the numbers are, right? So we're talking about hundreds of millions of visitors a year. I think about 100 million of those were in the US when it came to kind of major parks. Um, but whereas the US numbers and kind of European numbers are fairly flat, the huge growth is happening in Asian markets, right? And I guess in the Middle East as well, is like you mentioned. So, I mean, how important? I mean, I'm answering my own question, but how important is that region to Storyland's future strategy and the industry at large?
Well, like you said, it's where the growth is. Our significant surge of growth has been that Europe, Middle East, Africa audience. We were largely U.S. focused prior to COVID. We weren't really trying to jump on the Chinese or previous Dubai bandwagon.
Mm,
But partially through my partner Ben Thompson in London, being able to grow out our team there has been just a real benefit to go where the action is. And what's happening is obviously these economies are maturing, developing, diversifying,
mm,
and that brings with it this ability to both have time, to have desire, and to have the budget to be able to afford kind of these experience opportunities. And I think what we're scratching is a human itch that resonates across families. When you talk about Maslow's hierarchy, you got
mm.
to get past subsistence level, but there's a
Yeah.
certain point on that journey towards self actualization where you start thinking, hey, how can I get these kids off of these screens? And how can we get some precious family time and make some memories together? whether again with kids, without kids, just a husband and wife, just in today's increasingly, kind of cocooned, digitally
mm,
addicted, isolated world where, kind of that depression, anxiety, this is global pandemic,
mm,
induced by some of the algorithms and technologies out there. I just think this is a real need for people to
mm.
get out in the real world and kind of be able to look each other in the eye and make some memories and
100%.
taste transformation. So.
Yeah, I think, and that's only going to get more important with AI now. There was enough kind of content that people were, like you say, addicted to before the AI slop tidal wave that's
Right.
that's kind
Exactly.
of breaking on the beach at the moment. But
Yeah.
yeah,
You
I
can
suppose
you can
that.
be Neo in the Matrix if you want, but
Yeah,
I'm gonna
exactly.
I'm gonna unplug.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of follows nicely on to the next question I had. The experience economy, live entertainment, and themed entertainment are all booming on a global level. We're saying that those are going to become more. Those real world experiences are going to become more and more important, and there's a growing need to sort of serve those moments to people. What do you think is the biggest risk to or threat to that trend continuing? As an industry, if we look ahead a decade and it's all gone wrong, what's likely to be the reason in your
Well,
mind?
certainly. I mean, I just as a fan just talking as a historian, as a fan of Walt Disney, where he originally envisioned Disneyland as a nonprofit, actually, as really this educational opportunity to pass on values from one generation to another. That's really what I think great storytelling has its roots in, right? Is
Mm,
generation sitting around a campfire, right? And a grandfather passing on stories, you think about an Aboriginal setting in the outback
mm,
of Australia, they're passing on the stories of the wandering and as they're going on their rites of passage pilgrimage, you better pay attention to those stories that you were told, because
mm,
that's creating your GPS system that's giving you the
mm,
creation narratives of these landforms. And when you're,
mm,
about 100 clicks out, if you are dazed and confused, get turned around, if you don't remember those stories, you're going to die. Right. So,
mm. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think, for me, there's a real power there that when you start really driving decisions purely based on revenue, revenue
Mm,
per attendee or RevPAR or whatever. Yeah, I think it really, you start really trying to go for those one percenters or the highest capacity, and it
mm,
really can disenfranchise, alienate. And I'm really not a fan of the whole big bifurcation where you have these, increasingly expensive
mm,
luxurious experiences. And then you have this, there was a day when, for example, the Six Flags regional parks in the 70s, when those were local entrepreneurs that maybe went to Disneyland, were inspired by
mm,
Walt's vision, and they wanted that for their own family and their own kids and their own
mm,
community. And so they actually pulled that off. I mean, shockingly, a
mm,
large number of these people that had zero experience, they didn't come from a media background, they didn't have the IPs, they started again with those soil specific stories. The original Six Flags
mm,
over Texas Park, representing the six flags that, the different dominions or whatever that
mm,
had control over that region. Those were
mm,
the stories that they told. But again, the whole idea was to create a place for this burgeoning middle class family to be able to kind of come out and make some memories. And what's happened over time is there's just this increased uh, when they were more similar than different. I mean, the original regional parks had their own knockoffs of those original Disneyland rides, their own Jungle Cruise, their own Autopia, their own,
mm,
Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer's Island. And it just over time, it's like you've got completely different worlds. It's almost like different
mm,
industries, frankly.
mm,
I was having a conversation with one of the most respected leaders in our industry, Matt Wamette, who was president of Disneyland during its 50th anniversary 20 years ago. And I was just talking about, man, you've got some amazing assets in your portfolio, including Knott's Berry Farm, the park that influenced Walt Disney to build Disneyland. You had,
mm.
and he's like, well, we're in the amusement park business, rather than the theme park business. And I was like,
Right.
wow, because these parks had kind of And we've worked on many of those parks, but they gotten to the point where they'd been painted and repainted and so many
Yeah.
different IPs and brands that the people actually owning and operating these parks didn't even realize that they had roots in,
Yeah.
that were much more similar to the DNA that had the same Hollywood art directors working on them back in the,
Yeah.
and in some cases, we actually brought out some of those original renderings and plans.
Right.
And they're like, "That's beautiful. What is that?" And I'm like, "Well, this was your park. This is
Yeah.
your land. This is your ride
Yeah.
with its original, kind of vision that's been kind of
Yeah.
watered down over the anyway." So I kind of going off on a
No,
tangent
no,
there, but
that's interesting as well. Yeah, you do. I suppose it ends up a bit of a sort of Frankenstein's monster where you're kind of we again, it's something we talk about a lot on this show, is this balance of long and short term, thinking, and particularly when it comes to goals. And this is really a problem across all of marketing, the sort of part of the industry that I come from. This balance of short term and long term, even within advertising space, right? It's
exactly.
like, okay,
Yeah,
do we go for short term sales spikes, or do we try and build a brand over the long term? And the the all of the data suggests that the best financial outcome even is to focus on brand building and investing in that kind of those long term outcomes. But because of the way reporting cycles work and the way boardrooms work, and the average tenure of a CMO is like 18 months or something like that, and they're kind of, they have to hit numbers in order to cover their own backs. Then you end up in this sort of cycle of short-term thinking that creates a terrible experience for the customer at the end of the day.
absolutely.
And that's true in sport. We talk about that a lot as well. Obviously, the World Cup ticket announcement was met with horror by a lot of people. It's the same thing. This kind of idea of extractive, short-term thinking, whereas that opportunity to build, create and mint a new fan for life, and a lifetime value of that fan is going to be worth a hell of a lot more than the
Right.
inflated
And
ticket
that's
that you
and
charge
that's
them.
frankly, an edge that Disney definitely still has. That idea of, multi-generational memory making,
Mm,
that affinity, that nostalgia. And that's where, when you have decisions like taking out the rivers of America,
mm,
which I'm not saying whether I agree or disagree, but you certainly want to walk into that decision being cognizant of
yeah,
what that's going to do to some of the purchase decisions
yeah,
of people that really have such a core memory of that and want to share those kind of things. I mean, because people do think of those kind of things like Nate thinks about Opryland, as a little bit of a part of their, not only part of their city or their community, but in some case, it's part of their childhood, right? And it's
mm,
like you're extracting, you're ripping, you're doing the surgical removal
mm,
of part of their childhood, and so people take that pretty personally. It's a lot of
yeah,
emotion, trauma attached to that in some cases. So whatever you're placed with, better be better.
yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. Um, okay, so thinking of nostalgia a little bit, I suppose, is where this answer's going to come from. But um, if you had to recommend to someone like me who's not been to many of these places, what's the one attraction or park that you think that everybody should visit? What should be on everyone's bucket list, and why?
Ooh. Now that there are Disneylands, around the world, I mean, that would have been an easy first answer just from understanding the paradigm. I would actually recommend, especially for you, somewhere a little closer to home, Efteling, and maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but there's Disney Imagineers like Tony Baxter. The gentleman Michelle, that's now the portfolio creative director for all of the Disney holdings in France, basically came out of this magical little park that's still owned, I believe, by the Roman Catholic Church as a nature preserve. Technically, it's a nonprofit
Right.
nature preserve, but this magical park that was created by the storybook illustrator author, this Dutch illustrator, and the stewardship of that park over the time to have this uniquely Dutch European kind of art direction in terms
Right.
of these, generally public domain IPs, if you will, Grimm's fairy
Mm.
tales, Charles Perrault. But basically, my memory, and part of it comes from, being on a long flight and walking through the park, dazed and confused with
Mm.
not enough sleep, but what I
Right.
remember is, hazily walking through the Shire, through the mist, stumbling
Yeah, yeah,
upon
yeah.
these magical structures, walking in and being amazed at, these stories, watching the matchstick girl die before my eyes and then, raise and go to heaven, like, I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
surreal, magical, not it's so in all the ways that it's not the happily ever after Disney endings, it is
Yeah.
just this wonderful, magical place, and they've taken this thing that, again, humble organic beginnings and turned it into just a wonderful family resort, and,
Amazing.
that's definitely a place that I think captured that, again, that soil specific, sense of place, that, globally recognized IP in some cases, but you almost feel
Yeah.
like you're getting the real version rather than the globally broadcast Disney-fied
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
version. Because you're at least a little closer to the roots of where these stories were originally published and
Yeah.
created. It just feels like this kind of, yeah, it's magical, but it also feels authentic at the same time, and,
Yeah.
I can't imagine, again, it not having that sense of nostalgia for families that have grown up with this really civic institution, national asset that's been, stewarded and treasured, over
Yeah.
time by the folks caring for it. So that's definitely a place that I always tell people not to miss.
That's awesome. I'm gonna check that out for sure. Awesome. So the last question I always ask on these on these things is, as this is my journey across the experience economy, is who should I interview next and what should I ask them about?
Ooh. I'm reading a book by Theron Skees, again, another one of our creative directors, and probably one of I mean, he's had his multi-decades career at Disney Imagineering, but certainly one of the more articulate, having been, coming in from the industry, again, working with his hands, doing rock work, scenic fabrication, but then rising to the level of a portfolio creative director, just really articulate and great perspective, from
Mm.
hands-on to high-level theory. There's a lot of us in the industry that are, whether they're more doers or, some people are more, stronger at presenting or managing upwards in terms of
Mm.
being able to talk a great talk. But Theron's one of those guys that, has operated at the different levels, but is really always something to learn from
Nice.
Theron, especially working on, projects large and small. So I think that would be a good get. So.
Brilliant. Okay, yeah, I'll reach out. I think I had a back and forth with Darren actually on LinkedIn about some stuff that he shared. So
Yeah, he's
I'll
great. He's pretty accessible. He's really trying to make some of these resources available, and which is something I
yeah.
really appreciate. Yeah, and then I got to do a plug for, my co-host, another one of our producers, Skipper Freddie, in the Themed Attraction podcast, because we've been able to highlight. It was the first podcast specifically that was focused on the creators
Mm.
within the themed entertainment association and the experience design professionals. So, having folks like Tony Baxter, Tom Morris, a lot of my heroes, frankly,
Yeah.
that I've learned from over the years. And we've really tried to have a broad background in terms of not just creative and artists, but, some of the owner developers and operators and, some of the different disciplines that you don't really think of top of mind,
Yeah.
from architecture, civil engineering, you name it. So I think that may have been even where, quite often we would interview someone like F. Theron and then ultimately hire him. And so it was a
Yeah.
great way of getting to know some of our collaborators a little bit better.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
then,
It's a
and then
great
I
show.
also, we also do Themed Entertainment Associate. I'm a board member, and we have an award, lifetime achievement type award called the Thea Masters.
Okay.
And so you can go to YouTube today and look up the Themed Entertainment Association Masters, and same kind of format. I get to interview some of the guys that created our industry, that
Wow.
have been recognized by their peers as the masters of the craft, and so
Yeah.
some great content, especially for kids like thinking about getting into the industry, and it's like, well, I'm not the best artist, or,
Yeah.
I can't be an architect because I'm not good at math, or, just to realize what a motley crew it takes to pull these experiences off, and it doesn't matter what
Yeah.
your wiring is. If you're willing to get disciplined and go deep
Yeah.
and being good at something, there's probably space for you at the table. So
Yeah, make yourself useful. Well, I'm going to put links to both of those in the show notes.
I appreciate that.
I think I haven't seen the team that take the masters piece, but I've listened a lot to your themed entertainment podcast.
Honored means the world. Yeah. That's awesome.
Great. Okay. Well, look, thank you so much, Mel. This has been really good. And I'm hopefully we'll get the chance to go deep with you on some of the history nerdier stuff, which is definitely something I'm into as well. So
sounds
look forward
good.
to that.
Awesome. Yeah. Appreciate it. Thanks, Joe.
Cheers. See ya.